Hello, I'm Sally-Ann Ashley. I'm a UK-based abstract artist, and I also run a course for artists and creatives called Creative Shift. Creative Shift is a 10-week program based on my own creative practice of navigating the shifts in my work. Each time I become stuck in the studio or frustrated, I now have a framework that I can apply each time my work evolves. I've now shared my framework with many artists and witnessed numerous shifts on both the personal and practical level. I hear artists talking about how free they feel in their work, how much more confident they feel, how courageous they are in the studio. So if you're wondering if creative shifts for you this year, I've interviewed some previous course members and asked them to share a little bit about their experience on the course and how it impacted their practice, in the hope that it'll answer some questions that you have. I hope you enjoy the videos, and if you have any questions, please contact me on the links below. Thank you. Today I'm chatting with Charlotte Riley. Charlotte's at Creative Shift earlier this year, and I've invited her here today to talk a little bit about her experience on the course and how it's impacted her creative practice. So welcome, Charlotte. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. Lovely to be here.
So if we can just start, if you could tell me a little bit about your creative practice and how long you've been creating for.
So I have been painting since last year, so only 2022, in more of an abstract way. Prior to that, I think I've probably always created. Ever since I was little, I've always sort of stitched or sewn or done tapestry and various things in a creative way, but never actually thought I was a creative, if that makes any sense. Last year was a bit of a turning point for me. I'd had a very small creative business. I was making handmade cards and prints and things, but I wasn't actually painting on a bigger scale. But I had this sort of inner voice in me, and it was getting louder and louder and louder, and it's saying, you really need to try and paint. So I started painting. I took a course in 2022, and I sort of found a real passion for painting, and it sort of has just carried on since then, really. So yeah, I would say I call myself an artist from the point of last year, I suppose, in terms of painting. But yeah, that's so not really very long in the whole sort of scheme of things.
Okay, and what drew you to Creative Shift this year?
I think I just sort of discovered this excitement about painting. I absolutely loved it, and I loved being in the moment when I was painting. But then once I sort of almost reached the point where I thought, okay, I've done with that painting, I really sort of didn't know how to get back into painting. So when I sort of got to a bit of a lull, I wasn't really sure what my inspiration was, I didn't really have a process because I'm completely self-taught. So I didn't really, I suppose I had this idea in my head that if you went to art school, you'd learn a process, you'd follow these rules, and, you know, you knew what you were doing. But for me, because I was self-taught and I sort of stumbled along and found and discovered these things just by being curious, I hadn't really established any sort of foundation to go on. And I kept getting lost. So I suppose Creative Shift came along, and I was like, it kind of set me up. I thought I wanted something to give me some foundation blocks to go on that I could respond to, that weren't rigid or really sort of, you know, formulaic, but something that I could intuitively respond to and build my own framework. I think the idea of building my own framework was really appealing. Yeah, and I was just drawn to, I really like journaling and writing, so I was really drawn to those elements of it, and being quite responsive on a sort of personal level. And also for the personal development side of things, I think Creative Shift, I was interested in that. So it had lots of different elements that attracted me to it. So I kind of thought it would help me put those foundations in place that I could work however they fitted my practice, I suppose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, you were I think you hit the nail on the head in there when you said you keep like we're working away, but then we can get stuck. And then it's like, how do we get back in? Or what was the thread? Or does it even have to join up? And I think we have these internal questions and inquiries, don't we? So, okay, well, that leads nicely on to saying, so what was your experience of the course?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I properly sort of threw myself into it, really. Yeah, I loved it. I loved the experience. I loved the element of the group calls that you would do, and they felt really personal. You felt really listened to. Everyone was, yeah, I just felt like I was on the same page as a lot of people. I didn't really feel like a new painter or a new artist. There were so many commonalities between all of the other people on the course, and it kind of just flowed. I liked the personal development side of it, and it was quite a gentle approach. There was, there was no sort of strict rules or anything, but and you could obviously fit it into life and painting and whatever you had going on at the time. But yeah, I got a huge amount out of it. But I think at the same time, it's what you put into it as to what you get out of it. So I'm just looking at my notes to see what I wrote down. But I think it was just the support of the community as well. It created a lovely community, and the support from those other people as well, and yourself. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Okay. And did anything shift for you?
Yes. So I suppose when I first started the course, I was kind of looking for some answers, and I think it's quite easy, and it's quite easy to look outside for the answers. But I knew somewhere that I had the answers, but I just needed some way of drawing them out. And I think that's one of the things that Creative Shift can do. It can help draw out those answers for you. But it gave me, the biggest shift for me, it gave me lots of permission to do what I want to do in my artwork and to be the artist that I want to be, if that makes sense. And it gave me permission to be an artist in my life. I had kind of separated myself from my art and my life before, whereas I began to notice that it was all part of the same thing. And I think that's carried forward throughout the rest of the year since doing the course. So yeah, I gave myself a huge amount of permission, and that was the biggest shift. Permission to just follow things that I thought, oh, I'd like to explore that. I'm going to follow that direction. And I gave myself permission to do that. Whereas before I was like, I'd always question, well, no, I won't do that. I'll just follow this path because I think this should be the right way to do. So it was dropping all the shoulds, what I should be doing, and yeah, give myself permission to follow the sort of nudges and inspiration. Like I hadn't really worked out what had inspired me before, but beginning to learn how to sort of recognize that, noticing what you notice and all of those things really, really helped. I couldn't really work out where my paintings came from before I did the course. But now I go out into, a lot of it's inspired by landscape, and I go out into the landscape and I go, oh, that's where that painting came from, because the colours or the textures or whatever it is. So yeah, I do notice a lot more. So yeah, give me a
That's so interesting. And isn't it funny that like you had all of that anyway inside of you? There's nothing, I couldn't tell you where your paintings came from or what you were inspired by. But this, I think it's that giving yourself the time for the mindfulness and the introspection. Like it's not very far buried within us either, is it? It can just be, it just needs some prompts and you to put in the time, and then it's kind of, it's so freeing afterwards because you can join the dots now and think, well, I know what I'm doing. It's, I think mostly what I find in that is the reassurance that you're on the right path.
I think so. And
Or you're
also
on
that
your path, not
exactly,
the
yeah,
right path,
yeah,
it's your
exactly.
path.
Yeah, you're on the right path for you. But also I think, the reassurance that you don't always have to stay on that path. You can allow yourself to
Yes.
step off every now and again and come back on. I kind of built an assumption in my head that I had to be painting all of the time and had to always be in here and making and I think but actually there's been periods in the year where I haven't painted at all. I've maybe just journaled more, or I've done some other craft, or I've done other things that have been creative, but maybe it's not actually picking up a paintbrush.
Yeah.
And before I might berate myself about it. But now I'm okay. I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is just a little pause. Something, it might not be, I'm not making anything as such, I'm not producing, but that's fine because whatever I'm doing now will help towards something else later on. It might be in a year's time, but it doesn't matter. So yeah, I think it's recognizing that you're always being creative, but you might not actually be painting as such, but you might be being creative in lots of other ways. And I think that's what Creative Shift helps show me, that I'm always being creative in my life, whether it's going out and looking about, noticing things when I'm out on a dog walk.
Yeah.
That's being creative. And I didn't really recognize that in myself before. So definitely that's something Creative Shift has given me.
I think it's that it's the integration, isn't it, between our art and our life. And yeah, when we drill down, we can see that, yeah, we don't have to be in the studio with paintbrush in hand to be creating. It's like, that's kind of what happens at the end. It's all the other stuff that we fill our lives up with that really adds to that studio time.
Yeah, and fill up that memory bank. When you're out, you might not be wanting to be on your phone taking pictures, but you're absorbing it and you're giving yourself time to absorb it. And then all of a sudden it appears in a painting and you're like, where did that come from? But then you know now, because you've created those steps and those links and like those little bridges.
Yes.
So yeah.
Amazing. So roughly how many hours a week do you think that you allocated to the course?
I think I definitely did at least an hour of a day, an hour in the day, definitely, whether it was watching the course content, journaling, doing a meditation, or just having some quiet time to sort of process things. I didn't do a huge amount of creating, as in painting, during the course. Actually, I did lots of writing in my journal. So I definitely did an hour or so a day. And I probably did that every day, for the whole week. But sometimes it might be more.
Okay.
I think I'm trying to pass my mind back now. I didn't sort of time myself because I'm quite lucky. I've got flexibility in the day to do it. So I think that's probably roughly how much I.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say because it's the type of course that you can just slot into like 5 minutes while you're walking the dog, or when you're in the queue at the supermarket, you'll be noticing something and that takes you right back to so it's not a course where you have to apply this amount of set time for this and this. It all kind of washes over you, doesn't it? Sort of.
Yeah, and it might be like you say, you might be out on a walk and you've noticed something, and then you might come back and just make a note of it in your journal or something. So yeah, I found it really easy to just slot into my practice.
Okay. And how would you say it's impacted your practice? Or if I say the tools that I shared with you, have any of them stood out for you and you still use them today?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned about noticing. We talked about a lot of noticing what you notice on the course, and I just hadn't really put those links together prior to doing Creative Shift. I'd obviously been out doing stuff and not even thinking, oh, that's what that is, and leaning into sort of ideas that you might have or being curious about doing, and following those. And I think Creative Shift gives you the tools to follow them. It sort of almost encourages you to do that, because you've probably got this inner voice saying, well, why don't you try this? And I think, yeah, creative shift gives you the nudge to just say, well, why don't you try it? You never know what's going to happen, sort of thing. So I think those tools definitely I've carried forward, but also the pausing that we talk about on creative shift, where you're giving yourself permission to just, if there's a moment where you've come to the end of a painting and you're sort of at a pause, or you're at a junction where you're thinking, what direction will I want to take things in? Allowing that to happen and not feeling any sort of, or putting pressure on yourself to keep creating all of the time, that you can allow yourself a pause. And actually those pauses are really helpful to allow things to come in, things to leave, or all of those sorts of things. So I think I haven't painted much in the last few months, and whereas probably a year ago I might have rated myself about not physically painting, I'm much more kinder to myself now. Just doing this course really, and thinking, actually other things have come into my life that's taken up space, therefore I don't have that space to then do maybe something creative, but that's okay, because that's got a time span, and then I can go back to being creative. But I think it's definitely given me the mindset and the tools to go, do you know what, it's okay. It's definitely given me a lot of sort of acceptance and permission to do that.
Oh, amazing. So if there's somebody out there watching this and listening to us, and they're thinking about doing creative shift next year, what advice would you give to them?
Before I did creative shift, I was definitely felt like I was a bit out in the wilderness. So if you you might have, and I was obviously quite new to being a painter, an artist. I didn't really feel confident in calling myself an artist. So I suppose if there's somebody out there that's a bit similar in that position, maybe they found their love of painting, but they're just feeling a little bit on unsteady ground about it and not really sure what to do or where to go, or have that sort of self-belief and confidence to sort of create a framework for them to move forward in their artwork. Then creative shift will give you that gentle framework just to sort of hold you in that space, I suppose I would call it. It's definitely a personal development course rather than a how to paint course. And I didn't want a how to paint course. I definitely wanted to find out a bit more about me as an artist. So I suppose if that person out there is curious about who they are as an artist, why they want to do what they're doing, then I definitely think creative shift's the course to go for. It's it feels like it's opened lots of doors, and given me just that gentle framework to work to go by really in my practice. I definitely feel like I've got a practice now, so I think that's helpful.
I think I liked how you described it then as feeling sort of held. So you're held within your own practice, because it's not it's definitely not a prescribed, this is how you should it's
definitely not.
And I think when I'm sort of trying to draw the information out of people, it's such an unusual kind of situation, because normally when we go on courses, you're given all the information, aren't you? So you just accept it all. But this is a bit of a spin around, because I'm asking you for the information.
And then for you to accept, and then the process is then you acknowledging and accepting that information, that you've had all that information in you. I think that's quite that's quite empowering, really.
And then I think putting together these frameworks, you can see how flexible they can be. Like you've said in this conversation, well, if I'm not doing that, that's okay for now, because something else is in. And it's like it's you start seeing your practice as a really accessible and sort of flexible place. Not that it's this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And, you know, when it gets a bit, that's when it can be quite stifling instead of freeing.
Yeah, I think so. Just one of the things that I found in the practice was, you know, you're constantly, through doing this course, you're constantly learning things and sort of reflecting on maybe different behaviours or patterns of behaviour that you've done that have caused you to feel blocked or stuck or whatever. And one of the things I used to do was I used to clear away at the end of every painting session, tidy everything up. I'm a bit of a tidy freak. Tidy everything up, but then that was then the block for me to come in and go, oh, what am I doing? And I totally, by tidying up, I completely stifled my flow of painting. So so I just didn't tidy. I sort of tidied up, washed up brushes and things, but I kind of left it if I was in the middle of painting, I would leave it as that. So then it sort of almost felt natural to just come in and pick up the brush and get going again. Yeah. So that was just one simple thing that I was able to learn about myself through all of the questioning in Creative Shift to apply to my practice. And it's made it much easier to then, you know, continue with doing a series of paintings, for example. But I didn't know that about myself before I did the course. So yeah, that was quite interesting.
Like you say, these are simple things, but that is pretty, like, that's, I don't want to sound too dramatic, but that's pretty life-changing, isn't it? Then,
it was right, yeah.
Because then it's just a simple thing, but actually it's changed the whole stop-start of your practice. Now it has a continuous flow. So amazing.
Yeah. And the other thing I think was we were looking at sort of how we work and what materials we use and processes and things. And one of the things which I've observed about myself or I've noticed is that I have all the best intentions of doing a studio journal and keeping things. And I couldn't work out why it was so sort of, it didn't really flow as much as just painting. And then I worked out that I didn't like things in books. So I created my mood board. So I just stick it all up on the wall. Or actually, I just work it out on a painting rather than it all being in a. But they're things that I've sort of noticed about myself, observed them, written about them in my journal, and then thought, okay, well, that's obviously not the way for me. So I'm just going to do it my way. But I don't think you do these things. You can learn these things on your own. It kind of, doing a course like Creative Shift actually sort of helps you ask those questions of yourself, I think. So yeah,
and hopefully feel confident and have the courage to follow the answer like you have on yours. You know, okay, some people might keep a sketchbook, but that doesn't work for you, so you're going to do yours this way. And it's having that courage to make that decision, then being like, yeah, I'm standing by that.
Yeah, because I think you can be quite swayed just by observing other artists, reading books, social media, like what other people do, and you think, oh my gosh, I should have a sketchbook for every month of the year, and I should have all of these things. But actually, do you need them? Are they for you? But I think, just having a course like this, it can help you ask those questions of yourself and build your own practice. And like you say, have the courage to stick by them, really.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, all we're looking for here is to feel like, well, that we're happy in the studio. We want to be feeling good about making our work. And we also want to be feeling like we're progressing. So it's trying to take away as much of this, you know, looking outside and trying to compare and and that's what works for them. But if we actually just are molding our own practice and we're happy with that, then hopefully we can progress, and it's just in our own way. So I'm so happy to hear all of that from you, that's worked.
Really good. Yeah. And I think they're all tools that, and things will change, I'm sure, as you keep these tools in your sort of little toolkit, that practices will change and adapt with life. I think that's how it's going to work, really.
Oh, well, that's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I've loved listening to you.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. Take care, Charlotte. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.